Alright, so welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, we're trying to see how to build a simple CRUD app using Julia Oxygen.jl. Right, so you're using Oxygen framework, which in case you don't have it, you can just go to Oxygen framework. Very nice platform, and then you see how to use Oxygen.jl to be able to build a simple CRUD app. Right, very nice. So let's see how to do that. So CRUD, as you already know, stands for create, read, update, delete. And then most of the time is an essential concept you have to understand when you're trying to design or build applications, right? And it follows the HTTP method. So create, we can do that with post. Read, we have get. Update is patch or put, so partial update or full update. Then delete is delete, right? You can also use get for reading and for deleting. Perfect. And then we also have the SQL method. So this is not just only create, but create and then insert, right? To be able to create your data or your object. And then select is mostly used for reading. And then you also have update. So this is update, not insert. And then delete is for delete. So let's see how to build a simple CRUD app using the following methods in Julia. So I'll go back again to our exploits. So this is what we're trying to build. We are building a very simple app in which we can see, it's a very simple one, in which I can click on the blocks and now you can see all the data that is there. I can add a new field. So if I go back again to the post option, I can add something. So let me copy one from the ones here that we had. So copy this. So let's copy here, copy number 3, and then I will post to show you that it's working. So here, so let's go to try it out. I'll change it to this option here. And then I can make this one, or I can go to number 4, and then so Oxygen, Julia, and then I will just give it for building CRUD APIs, right? Something like that. And then I can now click on execute, and if everything works well, you see that the data passed. We had 200 requests. And then we have our data there. So if I go back again and I check my get request, you can see that now we have the data appended to it, right? Number 4, which is very cool. And then we can also read one. So in case I want to only read a particular data, I just pass in the ID there. So I can pass in the particular ID that I have. So let's say if I pass in ID number 4, as we did, if I click on it, we get back a resulting data. In case I want to delete one of them, so let's say I want to delete number 3, I just go back again and then I can delete. So number 3, click on execute, and then it has been deleted, right? Perfect. So if I go back again and I check, we only have 1, 2, and 4. Very simple. So let's see how to build this simple app from scratch in Julia. So I'll go back again to our workspace and let me close the previous one, and then we start building our app, right, from scratch. So let's start from it. So I'll come back here. Inside my location, there's no app here, so I'm just going to go back here and then create a directory called CRUD API, right? Or I can call it as CRUD app. And then into my CRUD app API, I'll just create my first file. So let's call it as CRUD API.jl, or we can call it as app.jl. Right, perfect. And then the same location, I'm just going to open Julia, and then I'll activate and create my virtual environment. So this activate the current location. So it's going to create it inside my CRUD API here, and then inside my CRUD API you can see that it has been activated here, right? Perfect. So from here I can now go back and then specify the package I want to install. So let's move to add. So I'm adding Oxygen. And then I also need to add HTTP and then JSON. So these are the 3 main things I'm adding. So Oxygen for the web framework, HTTP for the HTTP stuff, and then JSON for JSON. I also need to work with databases, so I'll install the various databases that I need, or the data, because based on our image we have the CRUD. We also need something to store our data, right? So using SQLite, you can also use Postgres or any of them. So let's add SQLite, and then we will also add struct. So these are the main ones. So we have SQLite, and then I also add struct types. Right. So perfect. So we have all of them installed. Okay, so now since we are done with them, I'll now move out from this location that I have here. So let's get out of here, and then let's exit from our current location. Perfect. So we have our app here, and then let's open it with VS Code, and then I'll bring it into view. Right, so this is our application. We have our app.js.jl, we have our project.toml, which has all the packages that we need, our manifest.toml. Perfect. So let's start with it. So with Oxygen.jl, all we need is that we need to first of all import Oxygen, so using Oxygen, and then we also need to go with using HTTP, right? So that's the most important thing for now, and then we will specify the server to run on, right? So let's go with here. So serve, this is coming from Oxygen, and I'll specify the port I want to listen on. So the port I'm listening on is port, it can be 8000 or 5000, but let's go to 8001. Perfect. So everything is going to go in between here and then here, right? So let's create our first endpoint. So this is going to be our CRUD API, right? So for the API, we first create our first endpoint, which is going to go with the create endpoint, right? So for the create endpoint, what you're going to do is that we're going to go with the macros, so get, right? And I'll specify the path. So the path is going to be my /API /version1 / let's say blogs, right? Perfect. So this is going to be our first endpoint. This is going to be not for create, this is going to be for post, right? As I said in here, we use the method post for create, so that's why I'm using that one. Perfect. And then it goes with a function which is going to take in the request, which is of an http.request type, request type. Perfect. Right, and then I will just end it. So that is how to create a simple function in Julia for the create method. So that is it, right? So the next thing is that we need a way to get the data, right? So this is going to be, okay, so first this for the create endpoint, right? Now we also want to connect our database to it, right? So how do we connect the database? So I'm going to create my struct. So let's create a struct to store data, right? So in that case, I'll call it as my struct, and then the struct will be, we'll just give it a name, right? A simple name to make it easy for us to struct, and I'll call it as, let's say, blog post, right? And then for the struct, we have an integer, an ID, which is going to be an integer, and then we have a title, which is also going to be a string, and then we have the content, which is also going to be a string, right? So this is our simple structures to data, right? So this is like our schema, something like our model schema, something like that, right? To make it easy for us with the data person. Then we also need to add support, right? So, support for JSON, right? For JSON serialization. And how do we do that to make it easy? You can just go with struct type. I'll come back here. Let's go here and then just go with using struct types. I will want to specify the struct types, then struct type. I'll pass in the type, which in our case is blog post type. Perfect. And then this will be to equivalent to struct type, not construct type, but a different one, struct function. So this is useful so that we can deserialize and serialize, right? Easily. Our struct. So this is very important. So this is for the data structure that we have, right? For our model and then serialization and stuff. Now, since you have done this struct, in case I want to read this struct, or let's say be able to pass it, right? I want to pass that particular data without any option, any difficulty. All I need is I can just do something like this. Let's say I have my data, then I'll just go with my JSON coming from Oxygen, and I'll pass in the request and then the particular struct blog post. So in case I want to return it, I can return my data, right? So this is very simple. We are not connected to the database yet. So let's open our app. So what we did now is that we imported our packages, we created a struct, and then we specified that we want to be able to serialize and deserialize it, and then we created our first endpoint, right? So we are just receiving the data and then serializing it or converting the request body. So this here, what it does is that it converts the request body to JSON, right? To struct. So it's converting the request body that we are receiving from JSON directly to the struct, right? Very nice. So let's see if it's working. So I'll go back again to our workspace here. Then to run it, I'll just go with Julia --project so that it uses the content inside our terminal to make sure that, okay, all the packages are used, rather, not the entire one from my system, but from this environment. Then I'll specify the name of the app. So Julia --project will use the content of this here. So perfect. So it's opening on this point, so I can just go back to my browser. Here's the old one. So let me close the old one, and then let's open it. Can close off this. So that page not found. So let me go back here and let's specify the docs. Right. And now we are in a Swagger and we have our first endpoint. And as we come here, automatically we have our result here, right? So like if I click on this and I paste in some data, so let's paste in some data here. So the data is going to be, we have not here. We have our ID. So we can just call that, say 1. And then we also have the title, which we will call it as, let's say, first blog on Oxygen. And then the third is going to be the content, right? So this is the first struct. And then we can now close this. So this is a simple one we have created. Hopefully everything works. If I click on execute, if you don't get any error, that means that it's working, right? So perfect. So we see that we got our response body back. So that means everything is working. Let me position it side by side. So what we did now is that we just created a simple endpoint that what the endpoint is doing is that the endpoint is just receiving some data. Apologies for this. The endpoint receiving some data, right? And then it's returning them, right? Very simple. So that's all that we need. Perfect. So we have seen how to receive data from the endpoint, right? This is very important. This is how to receive data from the form. Don't forget this, right? So you have to pass the particular to JSON, and then you're passing the request body to JSON, and then it's going to be converted directly to the struct object, right? And then you can return that data. So this data is now going to be the struct object, which in case you also want it in a dictionary, you can also do the same thing without passing in here. Right? So if you don't pass in the block, it's going to come as a dictionary, a Julia dictionary, so that you can use it. Okay, so let's see how to use and store this data inside Julia, right? So to do that, we're going to be creating our SQL features, our SQL syntax to help us with that. So we need SQL to help us with that. So let's go back again to our application, and then we need to import the required packages to help us with that, right? So let's go back with this. So it's going to be we have it here. Let's go to my database. So we're going to go with using SQLite, right? And then I'm just going to specify the path to the database, which is going to be my blog. I've got that blog SQLite so that you can see it. And then I will pass in db is equal to SQLite.db and then the path. So this is going to be my db path. Perfect. And then we can now create our database. So let's go create our table. So SQLite.execute. I'll pass in the database and I'll pass in my simple syntax. So we don't have an ORM yet, so I'm just using the normal table if not exist. Then I'll give the name of the table, so blog post. Then I'll pass in the parameters. So we have ID is int. These are just basic SQL syntax. So what I'll do is that I will paste it there to save us time. So we need to create the syntax. So ID is integer, primary key, title, text not null, and then the content text not null, right? So this is going to be our table that is going to be created. Perfect. So we have created our table and everything here. Perfect. Now how do we work on it, right? So once we start the app, this is going to be created, right? This particular thing is going to be created once we start the app. So let me save it here, and then let's stop the app, restart it, and then notice that once I restart it, inside my terminal, if I go back here, see that down the blog.sqlite has been created. This particular file has been created, right? And now we can insert our data there. So to set the data, so we see that we have the data here. Because I want to insert this particular data into my post, I can just create a simple method to do that. And then the method is going to be, so let's call this one our SQL functions for CRUD. So I'll just create a simple Julia function for the create, which is going to be my function. Function name is going to be, let's say, create blog, something like that. And I'll pass in my blog post, which is going to be of the blog post struct. And then I'll just go with db interface. So this is very important. This is coming from SQLite. And then with this, I can now execute. So execute, then db, and I'll insert into it. So insert into my blog post, then the title. Since we are automatically creating the ID, we don't insert the ID, so just the content, and then I'll pass in values. We have just the one, this, right? And then we can now specify what we want to put there. It's going to be our blog. So blog post dot title, because it's a struct, and then blog post dot content. You can also add, so this is it, right? So we are just inserting our data there, right? And then we can now return nothing. So this is our simple method to create, right? So create blog, so db.execute, insert into blog post the title, the content, and the value, and then we are going to put those data there, right? So this is one for the create. We can also do the same thing for update, and then so we have create. We can also use for the read block. So how do we read? You can just use select all to read. So we can just go with select all from the table. So the name of the table was called blog post, right? This was the name of the table we gave here. So select all from blog post. That is going to be used to read the entire data. So I can just call it, say read all, right? So something very simple like this. We need to ensure that we are closing the, this is okay. And then we can also do the same thing for reading one single one. So this is read all. You can do one for read one, right, which is select all from blog post where the ID is ID, and then you check if it's empty. If it's not empty, we return the data, right? And if it's not, it's null. And then we have, so create read all, read block, and then you can also have one for delete. So in case I want to delete, it's very simple. So delete is mostly like this. So let's go to delete block. We take the block. We're taking just the ID because that's the only thing we need. So ID, go to int, and then delete. From blog post table where ID is equal to the ID that is supplied, right? So in this case, it's going to be the ID. Perfect. So we have this option here. So this is going to be used to delete, right? So return nothing. So this is going to be used to delete. So we have gotten our create. I've gotten our read. I've gotten our read one, read all. I've gotten our delete. We also need one for the update. So the update is also a simple SQL. So you just have to know. So let's put it here. Update. So update blog post set title content where the ID is this, right? Okay. So we have created our 3 SQL methods. Create, read, update, delete. One to create a table, and then to insert the data, select to read them, and update to update, and then delete for the deleting, which is these methods, these functions here. Now we can now move on and then apply it. So we have one for the post. So in case I want to post the data, I can now go back and go with my create blog, passing my data there, right? Because remember, this is a struct, so this data is going to be passed perfectly there. Perfect. And then the data is going to be created. I can now move on, and then let's create another endpoint to get all the data, which is in our case to be a function, and then this function will be for this particular endpoint. So the endpoint is /API /version1 /blogs, and this is for reading all. So I'll have to pass in request, same thing, then http.request. So we have our simple endpoint again, and this you're going to read our data. So to read it, we just had the data, then I'll just go with my read all block. Then I can now return the data. We have to ensure that this function that we define above does not have anything. So this was it, doesn't need any posts, right? Because we are just reading all of them, and it's working. So this is what I read. So create read. We also need one for the read one. So this is going to be my path param, so blog ID. And since I have the blog ID, I have to also pass it here. So blog ID, and then this should specify the type int, and then I can just go with the read blog, and I'll pass in the ID, which is my blog ID, right? So this is for the read one, and then I also need something similar for the delete, and then one for the update. So for the delete, we go with delete, take the ID, and then we just delete it. delete does not return. Yeah, we can also return null in case you want, but you can just leave it like that. It will not change anything. So let's go straight away with this, right? Right, so this is for the delete. And for the update, update can be patch or put. So let's go with patch. I prefer patch most of the time, in which you specify the ID, and then we can just go with update, right, to update the data. Perfect. So we have gotten our update, which comes before delete, and then we are done, right? So see how simple it is to create a CRUD app. So all we did was that we created our struct here, which is going to be our schema or model schema. Then we created the functions for our database connection using SQLite, and then we created SQL syntax. This is not an ORM. And we created functions, one to create the data, or to insert data into it, one to, or you can call it insert block, anyhow you call it to be the same. Then we have one to read all of them, one to read by one using select method, and then one to update using update method, and then one to delete using delete. And then with the respective CRUD endpoint, we have the create, read, update, delete. So let's check and see if everything is working. So I'll have to close the API, right, and run the server again. Hopefully everything is working without any error. And then let's check it again. So if I come back here and I refresh, so we have all the methods. We have post, get, delete, patch, and then put, right? If I go back here and I try and I post in some data, we saw that we have to make sure that it's working. So we had an ID, right? It can be anyone, it can be two. The title, we can leave the title, we can leave the ID and it's still going to work, but I prefer it that way because we define it in our struct like that. And this is going to be, let's say, second blog, or we can call it as first blog. So one, first blog, this is the title. Then do another one for the content. So let's go just say Oxygen.jl, right? Perfect. So we have, yeah, perfect. So let's run it and see if it will work. I'll go with execute. If everything works well, we should see the results, right? So that means that it worked perfectly well, right? And then I can just go back again and check it out if it works. So I go back to the get blocks, the post, the read, and if I click on this, we should see the data coming. So we got null, right? That means there was no error, but we have to check and see why. So I go back to my blog site and see, we see that the data was inserted, right? You can see the data was inserted here, but if I go back here, we are not getting the data. So why are we getting no? So let's check the read method, and this is returning empty, right? So we need to return something for that particular function. That's why it's returning null. So how do we do that? What I can do is that I can loop through the result, so I can store this thing that is coming from here into a variable called results, right? So that it's there, and then I can now return it here. So I just pass the struct around it, and I'll loop through the entire data that is coming, right? If I save it and then I go back here, stop, yeah, and then let's refresh. I don't know if you have any methods to automatically reload, but if you have, you can let me know. And then we will just go back again. It's working. So let's execute. And then we have our data here, right? So the data is coming perfectly well. Perfect. So the read works. let's add another one. So let me call this one as second blog 2. This may conflict, but because of how it was, let's see if it will work well. Right, we had the 2. So the reason we passed in the wrong ID, but it worked, was because of how we defined it here. Right, so we are inserting here, and this is automatically generated. That's why it still works. Right, so let me try and see if I take off this, it will work. And let's call this I want to see if this will work. If I click on execute, it gives us an error, right? So that's why sometimes you have to pass in the ID there, because of, but you can define an input serializer for this. So if I put in 3, and this is third, we can define a new serializer for this method here. For this, we can define a new one, right? Or can use a dictionary. So if I go back and I check it out, it worked. Yeah, perfect. So if I execute now, we have 3, 1 and 2, 3, perfect. Let's see the delete, if the delete works. Before we see the delete, we can also check. We can also check the read. Apologies for it being long, but I hope you get it. So if I pass in number 1, we should get the first block. And we have the data, perfect, so it's working. And then let's go back to the delete. So in case I delete number 3, 3 is gone, perfect. So no, I mean successful. So if I go back and I check it out, we should not have 3. So let's close this, go back to here, execute, then we should not have 3. So 1 and 2, perfect. Let's see the patch, which we did. The patch is following this method. So the patch is following the updates. So I just pass in data. So I can make it better. So now I'm putting 2 because I want to patch 2. So this is 2. So I can copy this entire data set, and then I can paste it here. You can also create a new struct for this, right? So in case you want the second block updated, right? And then I'll go with yep, and then we see that it gives us a server error because of how the update method is. So we may need a way to, yeah, I know why. We may need a way to make it work better. So let's check the error of our message. So we have an error here, so we just have to fix it, right? For the update method, so let me go to the update method. So the reason the update is failing is that just like it is, we need to send this data, right? So how do we send the data? We have to use the same method we use for this, right? We need to pass it as JSON. This is very important. This took me some time to understand it, right? Not even here, I mean for this. So you just have to unpack it here, and then that data that comes, you just pass that data here, right? Perfect. So this is how to update it. So let's go back, stop, and then let's run it again, and then let's check it out again. So thank you for watching this long tutorial. I hope you have learned something. So see you another time. Yeah, let's go back again and check, and then perfect, right? So you see that it updated and gave us so many information. Right? It updated the entire stuff, what was sent, to give us a lot of information. This is coming from the actual code and what is being done. So you can simplify it, and instead of returning data, you can just return nothing, or you can just return, or you can make it simple, right? Perfect. And then the delete, we saw that the delete also works, right? So thank you for watching. See you another time. Stay blessed. Bye. Well, let's try the delete one more time. Yeah, it worked. So thank you for watching. See you another time. So I've seen how to build a simple CRUD app using Oxygen.jl, in which I have the create, read, update, delete, and then the various HTTP methods as well as SQL syntax. So thank you for watching. See you.